Alright, so today we're putting together the Hovership MHQ2 3D printed mini quadcopter. I was reading this issue of Make magazine, which is about drone racing, and I thought, this sounds like fun. And I saw a mention of a copter called the MHQ2, which was 3D printed. And I immediately went and looked it up and started pricing out the parts to build it, and turns out it's pretty cheap just because the parts are so small. Then later on, like the next day, I went back and continued reading and realized the very next section in the magazine was an entire article just about the copter that I had just spent all that time reading about on my computer. So if it's good enough for Make magazine, I think it's good enough for me. I should be able to handle this. So let's print the parts.
Okay, so I've got all these parts printed here. In case you're wondering why it changed colors, I actually printed two of them. One is for my friend Caesar and one is for me. I figured as long as we were both racing the same hardware, it would be fair and we would know who the better pilot is. So I printed this set for him in gold and black. All these parts are printed in ABS with brims, so these haven't been cleaned up yet, so all the holes are filled in with brim that needs to be X-Acto knifed out, but I'm going to let him do that on his. So as you can see here on the left, we've got motor mounts. The next piece is the bottom plate, which actually faces the other direction, down like this. So this plate actually goes here, sandwiches the motor mounts into place. This piece goes on top of some gimbal balls above there. Your flight controller goes here. Camera is mounted here. Then this plate gets mounted on top of this. And then of course there's the landing gear. So as you can see, it's not a whole lot of parts to print. It doesn't use a whole lot of plastic because they're really thin.
For a flight controller, I chose this Naze 32. It's very small and very inexpensive. It's about $25 to $30 on eBay. It does require you to solder these little pins on, but if you've got even basic soldering skills, you should be able to handle it. They're not that close together. I'm pretty notorious for ruining things when I try to solder them, and even I had no problems, so hopefully you can handle it too. For speed controllers, I chose this Favorite Sky 3 Quattro 12 amp. The motors I chose don't quite go up to 12 amps, so this should be sufficient, and it's all in one package, which is kind of convenient, a lot less wiring to do. But at the same time, you know, if one of these ESCs in here dies, then you're SOL, all the other three are garbage. So we'll see how it works out, but I'm willing to give it a try this time. You just need one battery in, and it's got the 3 wires for each of the 4 motors, plus the servo wires, built-in BEC, so you can power your flight controller from it too. I got this miniature video transmitter for sending the video from the copter to the base station, whatever kind of video receiver you happen to have. This is a TS5823. It's about $25 for this, and it's very small.
So the first thing you need to do is attach the landing gear to the bottom plate. The bottom plate is the one with these square pieces sticking out, which faces the ground. So you need 2 screws and 2 lock nuts for each foot. As you can see, I chose green for my front foot, and I also have green motor mounts for the front, so I can tell which way it's facing. Might have to add some LEDs to this later, but for now I'm going with the color scheme. So get those all attached, and then you're ready to proceed to the next step.
So one of the first things you're going to need to do is attach the motors to the motor mounts, and that's pretty straightforward. It's just 4 little screws on each motor. As you can see, I already did it. Got a little too excited and decided you didn't need to watch me put those screws in, but you might have to clean the holes out on this arm a little bit in order to get it to line up with the holes nicely. For motors, I've got these guys. They are Emax MT2204-2300 kV. They come in a set of 4, 2 different pairs, 2 for clockwise and 2 for counterclockwise. they reversed the threads on 2 of them, so the nuts that hold the props on don't spin off. So that's kind of important. Otherwise, you could just use lock nuts on there, but I'm going to give these a try. They were about $60 for the set of 4. We've got some 2mm bullet connectors, and basically what you need to do is put some melted solder down in the hole, then stuff the wire in there, and let it cool. So if you just hold your heat on the side of the connector and stick your solder in the top, you should see it just melt right into the hole. And then shove your wire down in there before it cools. Take the heat off, hold it still. And there you go. It's attached. Of course, you'll also want to remember not to forget to put shrink tubing over it, because you don't want anything shorting out. Because these wires are going to be right next to each other, and if they touch, you're going to have a problem. So we'll have to heat shrink tube them after we're done. So now that we've got that motor done, we've got to do the other 3. They're all the same. I'm putting the male connector end onto the motor side, and I'm going to put the female side of the connector onto the ESC wires. So I've got 24 of these things to solder into place just to connect up the motor, since they use 3 wires each. I have my ESC here with the connectors stuck on the ends of each of the wires. I was planning on mounting it like that, but these little ears on the side of the ESC are actually wider than the frame, so it says it can be run without the top and bottom plate installed. You can see that. I could take these screws out and take the covers off. I think I might have to, because this might be too thick anyway. Okay, so I got that taken apart, and you can see all the chips on there. But this is the top cover. It looks like a giant heatsink with some thermal putty kind of stuff on it. I'm not really sure that running this bare like this is really a good idea. But they say you can, so give it a try. Okay, so if you've never soldered one of these Dean style power connectors on before, it can look a little intimidating at first. What you do is you heat it up and put some solder on there, and you tin the pin, basically just get a nice coating of solder on there. And I do that on both of them. I've already done that one, and that will make it so that your wire will actually stick. Okay, so you can see I've got my clamp in place holding the wire on the tab. Got my heat shrink tubing down out of the way so it doesn't get hot and shrink into place where I don't want it. And all you gotta do is apply heat to the tab and the wire, which also has solder on it. So I have here my handy dandy Harbor Freight 1500 watt heat gun. Got my battery connector. Slide the tubing down in there. Done. Alright, so I found a zip tie. Attached that on there. Not super tight, but it's tight enough that it's not going anywhere. I got all the motor wires shrink tubed, and I decided to make the left side green tubing and the right side black. That way if these wires happen to get switched around, it'll be obvious. So the next thing we need to do is attach this piece and sandwich it on top. So let's get that done.
We've got some M3 by 18 screws here. I already fed one of them through here. You can see that they're long enough to put a nut on the bottom, which is exactly what we're going to do. So I'm going to put these other three in real quick. Okay, now we'll add the nuts to the bottom. Now it's time to attach the motor arms, and as you can tell by my motors, you know, one side spins clockwise and one side spins counterclockwise, and these are threaded opposite of each other so that they don't loosen when the propeller is spinning. So you basically want the motor to be spinning in the direction that tightens up the nut rather than loosens it. So that means this is a counterclockwise motor and this is a clockwise. Now I just need to look up which side is which so I don't have to take them back off and do this again. Okay, so I found the wiring chart for this thing. It looks like this. And we are doing that one. So counterclockwise motors go on the front right and rear left. So the motor gets mounted in between the two boards that we've attached so far. There's two screws that hold each one on. One that pivots so that the arms can fold in. So the pivoting one needs a 20mm screw and the other one is 18mm because the side that pivots has washers, nylon and metal washers on it, so it needs to be a little bit longer. Okay, so we've got the longer screw, metal washer, nylon washer. This way the nylon will rub on the plastic. Okay, so on the bottom we need to do the same thing. Nylon washer, then a metal one. Put another nut on there. And you don't want to make it too tight because this thing needs to be able to fold, but you can always adjust it later. You need to zip tie these wires up so they don't get squished, and since the arms fold in, you make sure the wires can clear and go in between the plates here, which also means your zip tie needs to be further out, otherwise it'll block this arm from being able to pivot. So that looks pretty good. I think that's going to work, so let's finish the rest of these. We've got the 4 motors attached with the zip ties in place, and we've got our ESC wires and the battery connector coming out of here. So the next step is to attach the what they call the clean side, which is the top half where the flight controller and other electronics go. I've already got these dampening balls installed on there. I didn't think they were going to fit. I actually installed those first before I started building any of the rest of it because I thought I had ordered the wrong size. Turns out they're just really hard to get in there. It's extremely tight fit, but they're in. You've got this piece, which already has the flight controller mounted on it, which is going to sit on top of there. So these have to go through those tiny holes. So that's exactly what I'm talking about. So there's 6 of these dampening balls that need to go on there. I had missed the 2 in the middle. Do yourself a favor, put those on first before you attach this top plate. Otherwise, it's a lot harder. Now you have to install these nylon standoffs into some of these holes on here to connect this piece to this one. So we've got these 5mm screws here and these threaded nylon spacers that are 35mm. So I got the nylon spacers put on there, 6 of them in the configuration they suggest, which leaves you access to the flight controller. Don't tighten these screws too much because, you know, those things are plastic. You'll strip the threads right out of them. But you needed to fish those gimbal balls through those little holes, so I think I'm going to take the X-Acto knife and open these holes up a little bit like I did on the bottom piece because they're too small.
You know, there's no fill on this. It's so thin. It's just a solid piece. So I can make those holes as big as I want without messing it up. Okay, so I pulled the flight controller off just to get these two dampers through. Opened up those holes quite a bit actually. But it's coming along. We're getting close. Okay, so this piece goes on here. On top of those nylon spacers. So that's how that looks. That's almost done. We've got our Zippy Compact 1300 milliamp hour 25C LiPo battery. It's a 3S. And that will go right here. Need to get a battery strap to attach it down, but need to figure out a good way to make sure these wires stay out of the way of the propellers. Get the motors and receiver wired up. Get this thing configured, and then probably proceed with installing the camera system so we can FPV this thing, because that's the ultimate goal. According to the wiring chart on the front of the ESC cover, motor 1 is actually this one, the rear left. And this is 4, 3, and 2. So the brown one is motor 1, which is actually motor 3 on here. So yeah, got to get these connected the right way or this thing isn't going to fly. It'll do flips or just crash. Okay, so I've got them motor wires plugged in to the flight controller. The receiver here is plugged into the other side of the flight controller. We could try to power this thing up now and see if we hooked it up the right way or whether we're going to unleash the magic smoke. So let's hope for no smoke. Wow. That's a good sign, I guess. It's alive. The way this is connected now, the battery is going directly into the ESC. But the ESC has a BEC that's going through this fourth motor wire here, which is powering the flight controller. And then the receiver for the radio is being powered by the flight controller. So we're going to have to figure out where to power our video transmitter, but otherwise we're just about done with wires. I got this wire here soldered on. That is the input from the receiver, which goes on those first 3 tabs there, which is number 1 and the 2 to the left of it actually, and that allows this little D4R2 free sky receiver to do PPM through the one cable. Now we'll also need to connect up a wire to this port, which is for telemetry, which will be connected to a couple of these pins over here. I've already hacked up a wire to do that. This receiver came with the cable that connects to that, so I put a servo plug on the other end of it already. There will be a link to the description of the exact wiring of this. I've found a couple other good videos that describe this process and how to connect these exact devices. I'm not going to cover it in huge detail because the odds of you choosing the exact same parts as me are pretty slim, so it's probably not worth the time. So let's get that connected, then we should be able to get telemetry through the Tyrannus, which, if we connect up the battery leads on here, will tell us when our battery voltage is low, which is better than a buzzer because you can hear it since the radio is in your hand versus flying around who knows where. Alright, I've rambled on and on long enough. This is the end of part 1. Stick around for part 2 where we configure the flight controller and take this thing outside for a test flight. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you like my videos. Leave me a comment. I appreciate it when I know that actual live humans are watching these things.